I'm Liam, 23 years old, standing alone on the graduation stage in my cap and gown. 4 years of sleepless nights, endless assignments, and pushing myself to the limit led to this empty moment. My phone buzzes in my pocket. A text from my dad flashes across the screen. "You owe us an apology." 37 missed calls follow. My family skipped my graduation for my sister's baby shower. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should see you the most clearly. This family story might just help you feel less alone. Growing up as the firstborn in our family of 4, I always knew my place. I was the responsible one, the example setter, the one who would make our family proud. My sister Natalie, just 2 years younger, existed in a completely different universe under the same roof. Our dad Richard worked as a mid-level manager at a financial company downtown. He wore crisp shirts, kept his desk meticulously organized, and expected the same level of precision from me. Mom Eleanor taught high school English and graded papers at our kitchen table every evening. Both were good parents by most standards, providing a stable home food on the table and opportunities most kids would be grateful for. The differences in how they treated Natalie and me weren't dramatic enough to complain about without sounding petty. They were subtle, consistent, and built up over years like water-eroding stone. From elementary school, I brought home straight A's and received nods of approval. "That's what we expect from you, Liam, Dad," would say, barely looking up from his newspaper. When I slipped to a B+ in 7th grade science, he sat me down for a 30-minute lecture about living up to my potential and setting myself up for success. When Natalie brought home B's and C's, she got hugs and encouragement. "You tried your best, sweetie. That's what matters," Mom would tell her sometimes, adding, "School isn't everything." I played baseball because Dad had played baseball. I took piano lessons because Mom thought it would look good on college applications. My schedule was mapped out from age 8, school sports practice, music lessons, homework, bed. Repeat. Natalie drifted between interests like clouds changing shape. 1 month it was painting, the next horseback riding, then photography. Each new passion was met with enthusiasm and financial support. When she quit, which she always did, there were no consequences, just acceptance. "At least she's finding herself," they'd say. My 16th birthday fell on the same weekend as Natalie's dance recital. My celebration was postponed without discussion. I sat through her mediocre performance with a fixed smile, knowing my dinner at my favorite restaurant would be rescheduled for the following weekend. Which it was, but as a rushed lunch instead because something else came up. When I was selected for a prestigious summer science program, the acceptance letter sat on the counter for 3 days before anyone mentioned it. The same week, Natalie made the junior varsity cheerleading squad, and we went out for a family dinner to celebrate. I learned to hide my achievements, to avoid seeming like I was competing for attention. I downplayed my successes and amplified my struggles, hoping to receive the same comfort and support Natalie got automatically. It never worked. My parents saw my accomplishments as expected, and my failures as disappointments. "Stop being so sensitive" became the refrain whenever I pointed out the discrepancies. "You're the older brother. You need to set an example." As if my role as the firstborn justified the conditional love I received. Natalie wasn't malicious about it. She simply accepted the family dynamic as normal. Why wouldn't she? It benefited her entirely. She'd sometimes recognize the imbalance, like when she was allowed to stay out past curfew without consequences while I'd been grounded for the same offense. "Sorry, bro," she'd say with a shrug and a smile. "Guess they wore out their strict parenting on you." By high school graduation, I'd internalized the message my worth was tied to achievement while Natalie's worth was inherent. I could earn approval but never quite reach the unconditional love they gave her freely. Still, I loved my family. I understood that parents aren't perfect, that they bring their own baggage to child-rearing. I made excuses for them in therapy sessions I started secretly attending during my senior year of high school. "They're doing their best," I told my therapist, Dr. Patricia Wilson. "Are they?" she asked simply. That question rattled around in my mind for years afterward. Were they doing their best? Or was I making excuses for behavior that consistently hurt me? I wanted to believe the former. It was easier than accepting that the people who were supposed to love me most had somehow found me less lovable than my sister. I graduated high school at the top of my class. My parents attended the ceremony and took photos. Dad clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good job, son." Mom hugged me and whispered, "We're proud of you." For a moment I felt seen. Then Natalie announced she'd been accepted to 3 colleges, and the celebration shifted to her. The focus on my achievement lasted approximately 20 minutes before becoming a footnote to her potential. I accepted a partial scholarship to a prestigious university 3 hours from home. It wasn't far enough to escape the family dynamics, but it gave me room to breathe. College should have been my fresh start, a place where no one knew me as Natalie's brother or the responsible one. In some ways it was. In others, the patterns followed me like shadows. I chose engineering because Dad said it had real job prospects. What I really wanted was literature to lose myself in stories and find meaning in words. But practicality won out another way. I tried to earn approval through sacrifice. The scholarship covered about half my tuition. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to make up the difference. My parents contributed what they could, which wasn't much, since they were also helping Natalie with her full tuition at a private arts college. "We need to support her creativity," Mom explained when I questioned the financial imbalance. "You've always been more independent." Independent wasn't the right word. I'd been made independent by necessity, not choice. My first semester was brutal. Between classes, work, and adjusting to college life, I barely slept. I called home weekly, mostly speaking to Mom since Dad was usually busy. Our conversations followed a pattern: brief questions about my classes, a few minutes of my responses, then lengthy updates about Natalie's college adventures. During my sophomore year, I met Professor Marcus Daniels in my Advanced Engineering Concepts class. Unlike most professors who maintained professional distance, Marcus took an interest in his students as people. After I aced his midterm exam, he asked me to stay after class. "Your work shows tremendous technical skill," he said, leaning against his desk, "but I sense your heart isn't in it." Something about his direct gaze and genuine interest broke through my practiced composure. Engineering was my father's choice, I admitted. Instead of dismissing my concerns, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Many students find themselves on paths chosen by others. The question is, what will you do about it?" That conversation marked the beginning of a mentorship that would change my life. Marcus became the adult figure who saw me clearly, not as an extension of expectations or in comparison to someone else, but as myself, with all my strengths and weaknesses. Around the same time, I formed solid friendships with 2 classmates, Thomas and Ryan. Thomas, with his boisterous laugh and unshakable optimism, balanced Ryan's quiet intensity and analytical mind. Neither came from perfect families, which made them understanding of my complicated relationship with mine. The 3 of us studied together, shared apartments junior and senior year, and created the support system I'd always craved. For the first time, I had people in my life who celebrated my successes without immediately shifting focus elsewhere. Halfway through my sophomore year, Natalie dropped out of college. She called me first, voice small with shame. "I can't tell Mom and Dad," she whispered. "They'll be so disappointed." I almost laughed at the irony. "They won't be," I assured her. "They'll understand." And they did. When Natalie finally told them there were no lectures about wasted money or squandered opportunities, instead they rallied around her with support and encouragement to find her path. I wasn't resentful, not entirely. Part of me was genuinely glad she didn't face the disappointment I would have in her position. Another part wondered why I couldn't have received the same grace when I struggled. Natalie moved back home and took various part-time jobs, none lasting more than a few months. She started dating Brandon, a guy she knew from high school who worked at his father's construction company. During my junior year, while I was pulling all-nighters to maintain my GPA and working extra shifts to cover textbook costs, Natalie called with news that would shift our family dynamic yet again. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. "Brandon and I are keeping it." At 20, my sister was going to be a mother. My parents, who I expected might finally show some disappointment, surprised me yet again. They embraced the news with excitement after the initial shock wore off. "We're going to be grandparents," Mom exclaimed during our next phone call. "We're helping them plan a small wedding before the baby comes." Just like that, Natalie's unplanned pregnancy became a celebrated life event. The dropout status was forgotten, replaced by her new identity as an expectant mother. Brandon was welcomed into the family, full his steady job at his father's company now viewed as responsible rather than limiting. Meanwhile, I buried myself deeper in coursework and added research assistant duties to my resume at Professor Marcus's recommendation. The stress took its toll. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and had my first panic attack during finals week. When I finally told my parents about the panic attack, hoping for some concern, Dad said, "You need to manage your stress better, son. Part of success is handling pressure." I stopped sharing my struggles after that. Senior year arrived with the pressure of job applications and graduation preparations. Professor Marcus surprised me by nominating me for a prestigious internship at Sullivan Engineering, one of the top firms in the country. "You're one of the most talented students I've had," he told me. "They'd be lucky to have you." His belief in me was a lifeline during those final semesters, when the weight of expectations, both external and self-imposed, threatened to crush me. I worked tirelessly on my application, spending hours perfecting my portfolio and practicing interview responses with Thomas and Ryan. When the acceptance letter came, I called Marcus before anyone else. His genuine pride meant more than the polite congratulations I knew I'd receive from my family. I was wrong about that. I didn't receive polite congratulations. I received no acknowledgement at all. When I called home with my news, Mom answered distractedly. "That's nice, honey," she said, clearly focused on something else. "Did you hear Natalie found out she's having a boy? We're all so excited." I hung up, feeling invisible yet again. But this time surrounded by people who actually saw me. The pain didn't cut quite as deep. 3 months before graduation, I marked the date on the family calendar during a weekend visit home. May 15th, 11 in the morning, Anderson Hall. "We'll be there," Mom promised, noting it in her planner. Dad nodded from behind his newspaper. I sent formal graduation announcements 5 weeks before the ceremony. I even included extra tickets in case my grandparents wanted to attend. 2 weeks later, Natalie called me directly, something that had become increasingly rare as her pregnancy progressed. "Liam, I need your help with something." She began, her voice sweet in that way that always preceded a request. "Brandon and I are planning my baby shower, and we're thinking about May 15th. My stomach dropped. "That's my graduation day." "Is it?" "Oh no." She paused, then continued hesitantly. "The thing is, it's the only Saturday that works for Brandon's family. His parents are coming from Arizona, and his sister can only get that weekend off work." "Natalie, you've known about my graduation date for months," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Can't you do Sunday instead?" "Sunday won't work for Pastor Mike. He's doing the blessing for the baby." Her voice turned pleading. "It's just a graduation, Liam. You walk across a stage for 2 seconds. The baby shower is a once-in-a-lifetime thing." The casual dismissal of one of the most significant achievements of my life stung like a slap. "My graduation is important to me, Nat. I've worked incredibly hard for this." "So have I," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how hard pregnancy is? I'm creating a human life here while you're just finishing school like millions of other people do every year." The conversation deteriorated from there. I suggested alternate dates for the shower. She countered that those dates wouldn't work for various guests. I reminded her that graduation dates weren't flexible. She accused me of making her pregnancy all about myself. Finally exasperated, I said, "Just talk to Mom and Dad about it, okay? They already committed to my graduation." "Fine," she huffed before hanging up. I should have known better. I should have called my parents immediately to remind them of their commitment. Instead, I naively believed that they would uphold their promise to attend the event I'd been working toward for 4 years. 3 days later, Mom called. "Liam, honey, we need to discuss the scheduling conflict with Natalie's baby shower." The way she phrased it as a conflict to be resolved, rather than a commitment to be honored, told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation would end. "There shouldn't be a conflict," I said firmly. You and Dad already confirmed you'd be at my graduation. The date has been set for months. I know, sweetheart, but circumstances change. Brandon's family can only come that weekend, and they're traveling all the way from Arizona. Surely you understand how important family support is right now for your sister. What about family support for me? The words escaped before I could stop them. Mom's tone chilled. That's very selfish, Liam. Your sister is starting a family. This is a significant life event. And my graduation isn't. I countered, heat rising in my chest. Of course it is, she backpedaled slightly. But graduations happen every year. We can celebrate yours another time. The familiar pattern reasserted itself, Natalie's needs and wants taking precedence, my achievements minimized, my feelings dismissed. Put Dad on the phone, I requested, hoping for at least some support from him. Dad's voice came through, already tinged with impatience. Liam, your mother explained the situation. We need to be at the baby shower. You promised you'd be at my graduation, I reminded him. I've been working toward this for 4 years. And we're proud of you, he said automatically, but family comes first. I am family, I said, my voice cracking slightly. His sigh carried decades of disappointment. You know what I mean. Natalie needs everyone's support right now. This isn't just about her. It's about the baby. About Brandon's family being included. You're being immature about this. Immature, I echoed in disbelief. Is it immature to want my parents at my college graduation? It's immature to make this about you versus your sister, he countered. You've always been competitive with her. That accusation, so wildly inaccurate it bordered on gaslighting, left me momentarily speechless. I had spent my entire life stepping aside, making room for Natalie to shine, accepting less so she could have more. That's not true, I finally managed. Listen, Dad's voice took on the authoritative tone that brooked no argument. We're going to the baby shower. Your graduation will be recorded, I'm sure. We'll watch it later and take you out to dinner sometime next week. The conversation ended shortly after that. I sat in my apartment phone, still warm in my hand, feeling hollow. A few days later, Brandon called me, which was unusual enough to be concerning. Hey man, he began awkwardly. Natalie's pretty upset about this whole graduation thing. I'm upset too, I replied evenly. Look, I get it's a big day for you and all, but you're making her feel guilty during her pregnancy, which isn't good for the baby. His tone suggested I was directly endangering my future nephew. She cried all night about how you're jealous of her having a baby. The absurdity of that statement might have made me laugh if it hadn't hurt so much. I'm not jealous, Brandon. I just wanted my family at my graduation. They're going to be at a different family event, he countered. Same difference. It wasn't the same. It wasn't even close. But I recognized the futility of explaining that to someone who had fully bought into the family narrative about me. Whatever, man, I finally said. Congrats on the baby. The week before graduation, I made one last attempt. I called home and laid out my feelings as calmly and maturely as possible. I explained how much their presence would mean to me, how Professor Marcus had arranged for me to receive a departmental award, how the ceremony represented not just my academic achievement, but my transition into true adulthood. Dad cut me off mid-sentence. We've made our decision, Liam. We'll be attending the baby shower. Every graduation ceremony is basically the same, but this is a unique celebration for Natalie and Brandon. The dismissal was so complete, so final, that something shifted inside me. A thread that had been stretching for years finally snapped. Fine, I said quietly. Enjoy the shower. I hung up before he could respond, before my voice could betray the depth of my hurt. In that moment, I decided I would attend my graduation alone. I would walk across that stage, receive my diploma, and begin the next chapter of my life with or without my family's support. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was simply an acceptance of what had always been true. In the constellation of my family, I was the dimmest star. Graduation morning dawned bright and clear, the May sunshine filtering through my blinds with cheerful indifference to my emotional state. I got out of bed at 3 hours before I needed to leave for the ceremony, unable to sleep through the hollow feeling in my chest. My graduation robe hung on the back of my door, the cap with its tassel perched on my desk. I'd ironed the robe myself the night before a task Mom would have insisted on doing if she were here. The empty apartment echoed with Thomas and Ryan's absence. They'd left earlier to meet their families for pre-graduation breakfasts. I made coffee and sat at our small kitchen table, scrolling through social media to distract myself. My feed filled with excited posts from classmates posing with proud parents, grandparents, siblings. I closed the app after 5 minutes, the contrast too painful to witness. At 8:30, I showered and dressed with methodical precision. Button-up shirt, tie, slacks, polished shoes. I practiced my smile in the bathroom mirror, determined not to let my family's absence dim this achievement. As I adjusted my cap, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "My parents want to know if you'll join us for breakfast before we head over." The kindness nearly undid me. I declined politely, not trusting myself to maintain composure in the face of someone else's normal, loving family. The drive to campus was surreal. Cars packed with families clogged the roads, excitement palpable even through closed windows. Parking lots overflowed with out-of-state plates. Parents helping unload grandparents from back seats, siblings carrying flowers and balloons. I parked in my usual spot and walked alone to the assembly area, cap and gown draped over my arm. The campus quad teemed with graduates taking photos, professors in academic regalia, chatting with parents, younger siblings running between groups. Liam, Professor Marcus, spotted me as I approached the engineering department gathering spot. He wore the full academic regalia of a tenured professor, his salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed for the occasion. "I was just looking for you." His smile faded slightly as he glanced around. "Your family?" "Not here yet." I swallowed hard. "They couldn't make it. My sister's baby shower is today." Understanding and something like anger flashed across his face before he schooled his expression. "Well, their loss is my gain. My wife saved seats in the family section. You'll sit with us for the ceremony." The simple offer of inclusion brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you," I managed. "None needed," he clapped my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Liam. The department is proud. You've earned this day." The ceremony itself passed in a blur. I sat between Professor Marcus's wife, Diana, and their teenage daughter, Emma, in the section reserved for families. They cheered for other graduates, maintained pleasant conversation, and treated me like I belonged there, all while tactfully avoiding mentioning my absent family. When my name was called, I walked across the stage with my head high. From the audience came whoops and cheers. Thomas and Ryan, along with Professor Marcus and his family, making enough noise to compensate for the missing voices. Dean Watkins shook my hand firmly as he presented my diploma. "Congratulations, Mr. Walker. Exceptional work." I smiled genuinely this time. "Thank you, sir." As I descended the steps on the other side of the stage, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I ignored it until I returned to my seat, then discreetly checked the screen. A text from Dad: "You owe us an apology." The 5 words hit like a physical blow. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my hand trembling slightly. Beneath that message, notification showed 37 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 15 from Dad, 10 from Natalie. I switched to voicemail, pressing the phone to my ear as the commencement speaker droned on about futures and possibilities. Mom's voice tight with controlled anger. "Liam, call us immediately. Your behavior is completely unacceptable." Dad not bothering to hide his fury. "Son, you need to make this right. Now." Natalie tearful and accusatory. "How could you ruin my day like this? After everything I'm going through." Message after message, each more bewildering than the last. What had I done? How had I offended them from 3 hours away while sitting through my own graduation ceremony? The answer came in a text from Mom that arrived as I listened to the voicemails. "The least you could have done was send a congratulatory message for the baby shower. Everyone noticed your absence. Your silence speaks volumes about your selfishness." Attached was a photo from the shower. My parents, Natalie and Brandon, his family, all smiling around a cake decorated with blue booties. Their faces showed no hint that they were missing anyone. No empty chair symbolizing my absence. Just complete family happiness without me. The injustice burned like acid. They had chosen to miss my graduation for Natalie's shower, then had the audacity to be angry that I hadn't sent congratulations for the very event that took them away from my milestone. More texts arrived in rapid succession. Dad, your sister is in tears because of your behavior. Mom, Brandon's parents think you hate the baby. Is that what you want them to believe? Natalie, thanks for ruining everything again. Each message twisted the knife deeper. In their narrative, I was the villain, not for anything I'd done, but for what I hadn't done, for not prioritizing Natalie's celebration while they actively dismissed mine. I turned off my phone. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a haze of hurt and anger. Professor Marcus seemed to sense my distress, but respectfully gave me space to process. After the ceremony concluded, Thomas and Ryan found me with their families in tow. Thomas's mom hugged me tightly. We're so proud of you, Liam. Ryan's father shook my hand firmly. Impressive achievement, son. Their simple acknowledgments, freely given without obligation, contrasted sharply with my own family's absence. We took photos together, the three of us in our caps and gowns, arms around each other's shoulders. Professor Marcus joined several shots, insisting I email him copies. You should join us for lunch, Thomas's mom offered. We have reservations at Lorenzo's. I thanked her but declined. I have some things to take care of, I said vaguely, not wanting to burden their celebration with my family drama. As everyone dispersed, Professor Marcus lingered. Liam, whatever's happening with your family, and I can see something, is remember that today is about your achievement. You worked hard for this. Don't let anyone diminish that. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. And remember, he added gently, family isn't always defined by blood. With those words echoing in my mind, I walked alone to my car through the dispersing crowds of celebrating families. I had achieved everything I'd worked toward for 4 years. I had a degree, a prestigious internship, lined up friends who valued me, and a mentor who believed in me. But the empty passenger seats in my car as I drove back to my apartment told a different story. One of fundamental rejection that no academic achievement could compensate for. I returned to my apartment, changed out of my graduation attire, and sat on the edge of my bed staring at my silent phone. Part of me wanted to leave it off to extend this reprieve from my family's anger. Another part needed to understand what exactly had triggered such vitriol. When I finally powered it on, the notifications flooded in 48. Missed calls, now dozens of texts. All variations on the same theme. My selfishness, my jealousy, my deliberate attempt to ruin Natalie's special day. None mentioned my graduation at all. I took a deep breath and called home, bracing myself for the onslaught. Mom answered on the first ring. Finally, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? No, I answered honestly. I have no idea what I could have possibly done while attending my graduation ceremony alone. Don't play innocent, she retorted. You deliberately sabotaged Natalie's baby shower. How, I asked, genuinely bewildered. I wasn't even there. Exactly. Her voice rose. You sent that horrible email to everyone right when the shower was starting. Brandon's mother was horrified. Natalie hasn't stopped crying. What email? Cold dread spread through my stomach. Mom, I didn't send any email. The one calling Natalie's baby a mistake and saying the shower was more important than your stupid graduation. She was nearly shouting now. It came from your email address, Liam. Stop lying. Realization dawned with sickening clarity. Years ago, when helping Natalie set up her laptop, I'd logged into my email and never signed out. She must have still had access. Mom, I didn't send that. Someone else did using my account. Who else would have access to your email? She demanded. Natalie would, I said quietly. She's had access since sophomore year when I helped set up her computer. Silence followed then. You're blaming your pregnant sister. That's a new low even for you. The injustice of her immediate dismissal ignited something in me. Years of swallowed hurt and resentment bubbled to the surface. Put Dad on speaker, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I want you both to hear this. Once they were both listening, I continued. I did not send any email. I was at my college graduation, which you both chose to skip for Natalie's baby shower. I turned off my phone during the ceremony and just saw your messages. Then explained how Dad began, but I cut him off. I'm coming home tonight. We'll discuss this in person. I hung up before they could object, packed an overnight bag, and began the 3-hour drive to my parents' house. During that drive, I rehearsed everything I wanted to say, all the hurts I'd buried over the years, the patterns I could no longer accept. I arrived just after 8 in the evening. Cars still lined the driveway, and street apparently the baby shower had evolved into an extended family gathering. I parked at the curb and walked up the familiar path to the front door. Inside, conversation hushed as I entered. The living room held a tableau of family judgment, Mom and Dad standing tensely by the fireplace. Natalie curled against Brandon on the couch, red-eyed and defensive, his parents perched uncomfortably on adjacent chairs. Here he is, Dad said grimly, as if announcing the arrival of a known criminal. Let's talk privately, I suggested, glancing at Brandon's parents, whom I'd met only once before. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone, Natalie declared dramatically. They all saw your horrible email. I turned to Brandon's parents. I'm sorry you were exposed to family drama today. I didn't send any email. I was at my college graduation. His mother's eyebrows rose slightly. Your graduation was today, but Natalie said you couldn't make it because of work. The lie hung in the air like smoke. Natalie flushed, avoiding eye contact. My graduation has been scheduled for months, I said evenly. My family chose to attend the baby shower instead. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. His father cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give your family some privacy to sort this out. After they awkwardly excused themselves, promising to call tomorrow, Dad rounded on me. Was that necessary, embarrassing your sister in front of her in-laws? Was it necessary to accuse me of sabotaging her shower when I was receiving my college diploma? I countered. We have proof, Mom insisted, retrieving her tablet. The email came from your account. She thrust the screen toward me. There it was, a crude, angry message sent from my email address to the entire shower guest list, time-stamped exactly when the ceremony began. I didn't write this, I stated firmly. And I can prove it. I pulled out my phone and opened my email account's security settings, which showed all recent logins. Look, my account was accessed from this house from Natalie's laptop at 10:30 this morning. I was already at the university. A heavy silence followed as my parents processed this information. All eyes turned to Natalie, who suddenly found great interest in a throw pillow's stitching. Natalie, Mom, prompted, her voice uncertain for the first time. Did you send this from Liam's account? You don't understand, she began defensively. Everyone kept asking where my brother was, why he wasn't at such an important family event. I had to say something. So you sent a fake email making me look horrible? I asked incredulously. I just wanted them to stop asking. Tears welled in her eyes. Then it got out of control, and I couldn't take it back. The confession should have vindicated me, but it only deepened my hurt. Not only had my family chosen her celebration over mine, but my sister had actively tried to villainize me to justify my absence. Natalie, how could you? Mom asked, looking genuinely shocked. It doesn't matter, Dad interjected, moving protectively toward Natalie. What matters is fixing this situation. Liam, you need to send an apology email explaining there was a misunderstanding. I stared at him in disbelief. An apology for something I didn't do. To smooth things over, he insisted. For your sister's sake. And there it was, the same pattern reasserting itself even in the face of clear evidence. Natalie's feelings, Natalie's reputation, Natalie's needs above truth, above fairness, above me. Something broke inside me, not with a dramatic snap, but with the quiet finality of a door closing. No, I said simply. What do you mean no? Dad demanded. I mean no. I won't apologize for something I didn't do. Not anymore. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the family photo album from my high school years. I flipped it open to show them. Look at this. My high school graduation, 3 photos. Natalie's junior prom, 15 photos. My 18th birthday, 1 photo. Natalie's Sweet 16, an entire page. I pulled out my phone, opening a folder I'd kept for years. Here are the text messages where you canceled my college visits to attend Natalie's dance competitions. Here's the email where you explained you couldn't help with my tuition because you were paying for Natalie's full ride. Methodically, I laid out the evidence of years of imbalance, not with rage, but with the calm clarity of someone presenting facts. I have never been enough for this family, I concluded. Not unless I was achieving something that reflected well on you. I wasn't loved for who I am, only for what I accomplished. That's not true, Mom protested weakly. It is true, I countered. And deep down you know it. Brandon, who had been silently watching this unfold, suddenly spoke up. Dude, you're just jealous that Natalie's starting a family while you're just getting a degree like millions of other people. His words, parroting almost exactly what Natalie had said to me weeks ago, ignited my carefully controlled anger. Jealous. I turned to face him. Let me be clear. I am thrilled for Natalie's pregnancy. I was excited to be an uncle. What I'm not thrilled about is being treated as an afterthought by my own family for my entire life. You're exaggerating, Dad dismissed. Am I? When was the last time you asked about my hopes? My struggles? When was the last time either of you put me first? Just once. When it conflicted with something Natalie wanted. Their silence was answer enough. Mom's expression had changed to dawning horror, replacing her initial defensiveness. Liam, I didn't realize. I know you didn't, I said more gently. That's part of the problem. Dad, however, remained unmoved. Every family has its dynamics. You've always been strong, capable, independent. Natalie needed more support. She needed more, or you gave her more, I challenged. There's a difference. Enough, he declared. If you can't put aside your grievances for your sister's sake, especially now, then perhaps you should leave until you've gained some perspective. I nodded slowly. I think that's best. Natalie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during my presentation of evidence, suddenly spoke up. You're really going to leave? Just like that. What about the baby? What about my graduation, I countered. What about my achievements? My milestones? My life? She had no answer. I gathered my overnight bag, which I hadn't even unpacked. I'll send Brandon's parents an email from my account, explaining there was a misunderstanding. Not for you, I looked at Natalie, but because they're innocent parties in this. At the door, I turned back one last time. I love you all. That's never been the question. The question is whether you love me for who I am, or only for what I can give and forgive. With that, I walked out into the night feeling simultaneously emptier and lighter than I had in years. I spent that night in a motel off the highway, staring at the water stains on the ceiling and wondering if I'd just permanently altered my family relationships. By morning, I had 17 missed calls, 5 from Mom, 2 from Dad, and surprisingly 10 from Natalie. I listened to none of the voicemails, sending only a brief text to Mom, I'm safe. Heading back to campus. Need time. Thomas offered his couch when I returned his roommate, having left early for summer break. Stay as long as you need, man, he said with characteristic generosity. Those first few weeks passed in a blur of apartment hunting in preparation for my internship at Sullivan Engineering. I found a small studio 15 minutes from the office, nothing fancy but all mine. The rent stretched my budget thin, but Professor Marcus connected me with some weekend tutoring opportunities to supplement my internship stipend. The internship itself proved challenging in exactly the ways I needed. The projects were complex, the expectations high, and the feedback direct. My supervisor, James Sullivan himself, didn't accept excuses or half measures, but he recognized and rewarded quality work. During my second week, I was assigned to collaborate with Kate Winters, a third-year engineer who specialized in sustainable design. Dark-haired, quick-witted, and refreshingly straightforward Kate immediately impressed me with her technical skills and unpretentious confidence. Your structural analysis on the Richardson project was solid, she told me after reviewing my work. But you missed an opportunity to incorporate passive cooling elements that could reduce energy consumption by 30%. Instead of defensiveness, I felt curiosity. Show me how. That simple exchange marked the beginning of a professional relationship that would gradually evolve into something more. Kate challenged me intellectually, never sugar-coating criticism but also freely offering praise when deserved. After years of conditional approval from my family, her straightforward assessments felt like fresh air. Meanwhile, Professor Marcus continued his mentorship, inviting me to academic conferences and introducing me to his professional network. Investment in promising talent, he called it waving away my thanks. At one such conference over dinner with several industry leaders, Marcus raised his glass in a toast to Liam Walker, whose exceptional work reflects not just technical skill but innovative thinking. Sullivan Engineering is fortunate to have him even temporarily. The genuine praise from someone whose opinion I valued deeply meant more than any validation I'd sought from my family. As weeks turned to months, I settled into a rhythm of work professional development and slowly rebuilding my sense of self outside my family's expectations. I still hadn't spoken directly to any of them, though. Mom texted weekly updates I responded to with brief acknowledgments. 6 months after graduation, as summer faded into fall, my phone rang with my mother's number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, as had become my habit, but something compelled me to answer. Liam. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Thank you for picking up. What's up, Mom? I kept my tone neutral, protective. I was hoping we could meet. Just you and me, to talk. The request surprised me. In our family's pattern, confrontations were typically avoided, until they could be reframed as misunderstandings, with everyone expected to move on without resolution. Why, I asked, simply. Her pause stretched long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Finally, she said, because I've been doing a lot of thinking about what you said. About how we've treated you. I want to understand better. We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our locations the following Saturday. I arrived early, claiming a corner table and ordering coffee to occupy my hands. When Mom walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked, older, somehow less certain. She sat across from me, hands clasped tightly around her purse. You look good, she offered. Healthy. The internship is going well, I replied. They've offered me a permanent position starting in January. That's wonderful, she said, with what seemed like genuine pleasure. I'm very proud of you. The conversation meandered through safe topics: my apartment, her school year, neutral family news. Finally, as our coffees cooled, she took a deep breath. I've been seeing a therapist, she said abruptly, since about a month after your graduation. This revelation surprised me completely. In our family, therapy was viewed as something for people with real problems, not something respectable people needed. What made you decide to do that? I asked carefully. You did, she answered simply. What you said that night. About not being loved for who you are. It kept me awake for weeks. I started looking back at pictures, at emails, at how we'd handled things over the years. Her voice wavered. And I realized you were right. The validation I'd sought for so long landed with unexpected weight. Does Dad feel the same way? Her expression tightened. Your father has more difficulty accepting criticism. He believes his intentions were always good. Therefore, his actions can't have been harmful. Translation: Dad still thought I was overreacting. And Natalie. She had the baby 2 months ago. A boy, Lucas. Mom hesitated. She asks about you. Often. I nodded, processing this. My nephew had been born. I was an uncle to a child I'd never seen. She admitted sending that email, Mom continued. To everyone, including Brandon's parents. She told them the truth. Another surprise. Natalie rarely took responsibility for her actions without extensive excuses. The thing is, Liam, Mom leaned forward, I don't expect you to forgive us right away. Or maybe ever. But I want you to know that I see now what we did. How we made you earn the love and support we gave Natalie freely. Tears welled in her eyes. And I am so sorry. The apology, unexpected and unqualified, cracked something in my carefully constructed defenses. Not enough to fully trust again, but enough to consider the possibility of a different kind of relationship moving forward. I appreciate that, I said finally. It means a lot to hear you say it. Would you? Would you consider meeting your nephew someday? She asked tentatively. No pressure, no expectations, Natalie asked me to ask. She says she understands if you're not ready. I considered the question carefully. Maybe. Not right away. And not at a big family gathering. Something small, with clear boundaries. Mom nodded eagerly. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. As we parted, she hugged me, a real hug, not the perfunctory embrace I'd grown accustomed to. I'm trying to be better, she whispered. For you. For Natalie. For Lucas. For myself. I believed her. Whether that trying would translate into lasting change remained to be seen, but the effort itself represented a shift in our family's tectonic plates. Back at my apartment, I called Kate, who had become my closest confidant over the months. How did it go? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Better than expected, I admitted. My mom actually apologized, like really apologized. That's huge, Kate said. Are you okay? The question made me pause. Was I think so, I said slowly. It doesn't fix everything, but it's a start. Want company tonight, she offered. I make a mean pasta carbonara. Her simple offer of presence, of connection without demands, embodied everything I'd been building in my new life relationships, based on mutual respect rather than obligation, support freely given rather than extracted. I'd like that, I said, feeling something like hope unfurl in my chest. 3 weeks after meeting with Mom, I finally agreed to visit Natalie and meet my nephew. I set clear parameters, a short visit at her house, no other family members present, and I would leave if things became confrontational. The drive to Natalie's modest ranch-style home felt surreal. 9 months had passed since I'd stormed out of my parents' house, 9 months of building a life defined by my choices rather than family expectations. Brandon answered the door, his usual bravado notably subdued. Hey, Liam. Thanks for coming. He stepped aside awkwardly to let me in. Natalie sat in the living room, cradling a tiny bundle. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. Hi, she said softly. Hi, I replied. My eyes drawn to the small face barely visible among the blankets. This is Lucas, she said, adjusting the baby so I could see him better. Lucas, this is your Uncle Liam. Something shifted in my chest at the word uncle, a role I'd never played before, a connection to this new person untainted by past dynamics. Would you like to hold him? Natalie offered. I nodded, carefully accepting the warm weight of my nephew. His eyes, Natalie's eyes, gazed up at me with innocent curiosity. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a person who knew nothing of family history or hurt feelings. He's perfect, I said honestly. Liam, Natalie began, her voice catching. I'm so sorry. For everything, the email, the baby shower timing, all of it. I was awful. The direct apology surprised me almost as much as Mom's had. The Natalie I knew rarely acknowledged fault without qualification. Parenthood has changed my perspective, she continued, when I didn't immediately respond. I keep thinking about how I'd feel if Lucas was treated the way you were, if people made him feel like he was never quite enough. She wiped away tears. I don't want to be that kind of mother, or that kind of sister anymore. The sincerity in her voice seemed genuine, but I'd been burned too many times to accept it without caution. I appreciate that, Nat. I really do. But it's going to take time to rebuild trust. She nodded. I know. I just hope you'll give me the chance. We spent the next hour in careful conversation, catching up on our lives while passing Lucas between us. Brandon mostly listened, occasionally adding comments, but clearly trying to respect the fragile reconnection happening. As I prepared to leave, Natalie walked me to the door. Mom said you're working at Sullivan Engineering now. Full-time. Starting next month, I confirmed. They offered me a permanent position after the internship. That's amazing, she said, and seemed to mean it. You always were the smart one. I smiled slightly. We were both smart, Nat, just in different ways. She returned the smile, a flicker of the sister I'd once been close to showing through. Will you come back to see Lucas, I mean? Yes, I said after a moment's consideration. I'd like that. The following weekend, Kate accompanied me to a dinner at Professor Marcus's home, where he and his wife Diana had invited several current and former students. The evening was filled with stimulating conversation, genuine laughter, and the warm acceptance I'd found in this chosen family. You seem lighter tonight, Kate observed as we walked back to my car afterward. Do I? She nodded. Less weight on your shoulders. Meeting your nephew went. Well, I take it. I considered this. It did. And it made me realize something. What's that? That I can choose what role family plays in my life now. I don't have to cut them off completely, but I don't have to accept the old patterns either. Kate squeezed my hand. Boundaries are healthy. The word captured exactly what I'd been struggling to define: boundaries. Not walls, not bridges, but clear demarcations of what I would and wouldn't accept. 2 weeks later, Richard, my father, requested a meeting. Unlike Mom's hesitant outreach, his came as a formal text. We should talk. My office, Saturday, 3 p.m. The location spoke volumes, his territory, his terms. The old me would have complied without question. The new me suggested an alternative coffee shop on Main Street would work better for me. Sunday at 2. His delayed response suggested surprise at my counteroffer, but he eventually agreed. Sunday arrived with a knot of tension in my stomach. Dad was waiting when I arrived, his posture stiff, expression guarded. You look well, he offered as I sat down. Thanks. How are you? Fine, fine. Business is good. Your mother probably told you she's been seeing someone. He said it dismissively, as if her therapy was a minor eccentricity. She mentioned it. An awkward silence descended, neither of us quite sure how to navigate this new territory. Sullivan Engineering is a good company, he finally said. James Sullivan sits on several municipal boards. Good connections there. Of course, he would frame my achievement in terms of networking potential rather than personal accomplishment. The work is interesting, I replied neutrally. I'm learning a lot. He nodded then. Seemed to steel himself for what came next. Your mother thinks I owe you an apology. Not I want to apologize or I am sorry, but your mother thinks I owe you an apology. Still deflecting responsibility. Do you think you do? I asked directly. He frowned. I've always wanted what's best for you and your sister. Everything I did was with that intention. Intent isn't the same as impact, I pointed out quietly. His jaw tightened. I'm trying here, Liam. I know. And I appreciate that. But I need more than grudging half apologies to rebuild our relationship. What do you want from me? Frustration edged his voice. Acknowledgement, I said simply. Recognition that your treatment of Natalie and me was unbalanced. That you held me to standards she was never expected to meet. That you dismissed my feelings and achievements while celebrating hers. Dad stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. When he looked up, something had shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor of certainty he'd always worn. I never meant to make you feel less than, he said slowly. I pushed you because I saw your potential. I didn't push Natalie the same way because... He trailed off. Because I prompted. Because she reminded me of myself at that age. Unfocused. Unsure. The admission seemed to cost him something. And you reminded me of my older brother. This was new information. Dad rarely spoke of his brother who had died before I was born. Michael was brilliant, he continued. Everything came easily to him. My parents expected me to be just like him, and I never measured up. He gave a short, humorless laugh. I guess I repeated the pattern without realizing it, just from the other side. The insight into his behavior didn't excuse it, but it provided context I'd never had before. I can't change the past, he said finally. But I am sorry for how it affected you. Not a perfect apology, but perhaps the best he could manage at this point. A starting place. Thank you for saying that, I said. It means a lot. As winter turned to spring, I established a new rhythm with my family. regular but limited contact, clear boundaries about what I would and wouldn't discuss, and immediate disengagement when old patterns emerged. Sometimes it worked beautifully. Other times we stumbled. Kate became an official part of my life, our professional collaboration evolving into a personal connection built on mutual respect and genuine understanding. She met my family during a carefully orchestrated dinner that I hosted in my apartment-neutral territory where I controlled the environment. "They're trying," she observed afterward. "Your mom especially." "They are," I agreed. "And that's something." Professor Marcus continued his mentorship now as both professional colleague and friend. "Family systems don't change overnight," he reminded me during one of our regular coffee meetings. "What matters is the direction of change." The most profound shift, however, came within myself. I no longer measured my worth by my family's approval. I'd built a life filled with meaningful work, authentic relationships, and self-acceptance that didn't depend on external validation. 1 year after graduation, I stood in my apartment looking at a photo Kate had taken of me with Lucas on my lap, the baby's chubby hands reaching for my face. Next to it sat a framed certificate of achievement from Sullivan Engineering and a candid shot of me with Professor Marcus and Diana at their anniversary party. These images represented the truth I'd finally embraced: family isn't solely defined by blood. It's created through consistent love, genuine respect, and mutual support. Some people are fortunate enough to find these qualities in their biological family. Others must build their family of choice from the ground up. I had done both, preserving the biological connections worth saving while creating new bonds based on healthier foundations. The path hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, backsliding into old patterns, painful confrontations when boundaries were tested. But standing there looking at tangible evidence of my rebuilt life, I knew with certainty that the journey had been worth every difficult step. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate: "Dinner with Thomas and his new girlfriend tonight. They want to try that Thai place downtown." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely, can't wait." Some people spend their entire lives trying to earn love that should be freely given. I had finally learned to walk away from that impossible task and toward those who offered love without conditions, acceptance without achievement, and support without scorekeeping. That was the most valuable graduation of all. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? Comment below and share your experience. Sometimes the hardest thing is recognizing that we deserve better than what we've been given. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about finding your worth. And remember, you don't need to earn love that should be given freely. Thank you for listening to my story today.